Hey everyone, it's been a long actually break for me. I took a week off to change podcast hosts, so I'm no longer on Anchor and I'm back with my old host, Libsyn. And this evening I've actually been re-uploading all of my files to remove the ad and also to rectify a technical issue. So, lesson to everyone, if you're going to change podcast hosts, be prepared to do some work because it takes a little bit of time. Hopefully that's a lesson a lot of you don't have to learn in your lives. I suppose it's the same as changing any other things or basically what I do at work every day around software stuff. So I'm really glad to be back. I actually have been recording a lot. So I have about 10 episodes already recorded and more coming up and just some exciting things coming. Personally, in my goal with comedy, I've added a new personal goal of just like doing a solo show. And I don't know why I took that on right now, other than to say that after the last year, and there's been a lot of things in my life that have happened where I don't take things for granted too much, but after the last year, I certainly don't. And so it was kind of like the opportunity was here to do Brighton Fringe and Camden Fringe, which are festivals in England. And I decided to take them, and I have someone I'm working with who I'll be interviewing on the podcast later this season, but we're just both doing solo shows and just checking it out. And I got some great news today. I'm actually recording this on April 13th. Basically, I got some great news today, and I'm going to be doing 2 gigs at Brighton Fringe. One's my own, and then one's on another bill. So just really awesome things happening. So kind of looking forward to just things getting back to a little bit of normal. We'll see. I hope that everyone listening is doing well. And if you're struggling right now, it's understandable. It's kind of a weird transition period right now from this time where everything kind of fell apart a year ago and we all just kind of stayed in our homes. And then to this period in the middle that I don't know about you, but I barely remember the fall and winter anymore. I just don't know what happened to the time. And then now we're transitioning into this anxiety-ridden place of reintroducing ourselves to the public. And some people never changed, I guess, so they might not know what that means. But some of us have been alone for a long time in our apartments or just with our family, and that's it. And it's a time of change. So just be gentle with yourself. Understand that even if the pandemic's not an excuse not to see people or not to see specific people, I should say, doesn't mean you can't say no. So you can still say no. You can still say, hey, you know what? I'm not feeling like doing that today, or I wanted to go do something else. And you can still do that. You don't have to have COVID as an excuse. So just want to put that out there. We are opening up this week in London. So yesterday, the 12th was the first day pubs were open. And that's just outside. And it's pretty cool though, because it's just going to feel a little bit more like what I was expecting when I moved here. So this episode, this is an interesting one because I got into a discussion I wasn't expecting, and I felt very vulnerable and I felt very angry at one point, but I knew I couldn't react in an angry way because I'm talking to a guest and I'm recording the conversation. And I think if you think about your conversations being recorded and how you would talk when they're recorded versus when they're not, I almost think that's a good way of managing your behavior. At least for me it is. So I was just thinking that might be an interesting thing to mention, that, think about what you would say if you knew you were being recorded. It's probably different than what you would say when you're not, or what you do say when you're not. But my guest is Noel Bagwell, and he's really cool. I mean, he's a lawyer, and the first lawyer I've had on here for sure. We met on a website where, you can find guests and connect with people. And I'm going to be on his podcast coming up too, and I'll post when I'm on that. And I've had a good time talking to him, but we also stand on very different sides of certain things. And one thing that's really strange in these times is that we don't have discussions with people we don't agree with very often. I mean, I know I've created just an information silo for myself, and I've created this echo chamber where I remove people from Facebook for different reasons. I hide people or don't follow them, things like that, just because I don't want to engage. And I think even, just talking to friends and family, like some people believe you can't say anything anymore. You're not allowed to say anything anymore. It's like you can, it's just there's consequences. People are going to call you out. And I deal with that in comedy too. Like people think, well, you can't joke about things. Well, you can, it better be funny. And so we got into a discussion about cancel culture, and it was a hard discussion at the time because I kind of felt myself digging in, but I knew I had to be open and I had to listen, and I had to show respect, and Noel was being respectful to me. I mean, as far as like listening when I responded to him, and I think it was good because it was really this hard practice. And I think I do encourage people, especially with family, family, it's hard with family because I know I don't agree with my family on 100% of everything, and a lot of people don't, but there's this art of trying to listen, and it's not going to end up in agreeing, but just listening and finding the commonalities. And I think we did that. It was difficult to listen back to because I was nervous. I was nervous about, what did I really say? And we do get into some subjects that might be difficult. So I want to warn people that, we do talk about the murders in Atlanta, where the person went to massage parlors and killed people. And, it was hard to it was newer back then, but even now I still think it's hard for me to just look around and think that someone could just come up with a gun and kill me or kill someone. And, this keeps happening. And, we went back and forth a little bit, and I am definitely interested in hearing what people think. And I appreciate Noel, trusting me to have that discussion with me on this podcast. I think that it was valuable, and I'm glad to share it now. I had a choice. I could have cut it. I could have not shared the episode, but I think it's important that people listen to conversations, and people also have conversations with people they don't agree with. And it's something I should do more. There were some things that I don't agree with that are said, but I don't even know if I agree with everything I said at this point, honestly. One thing I didn't really argue back on was a statement about the media. And I just want to say that I really respect journalists, and I think that they work very hard. I listen to The Daily. It's one of my favorite podcasts. And I know the reporters work very, very hard there to uncover stories. And I think we're all biased in our own ways, but I do think that these people work really hard. And so I want to make sure, and I feel like I'm even media doing this, right? This is a form of media. And I don't think all media is bad. I do think that the media does sometimes not cover things that they should or the way they should. And I think we've even seen that with the violence against AAPI people. It hasn't been covered. And so, I don't know, I'm rambling here, so I think I'll stop, but I just want people to really listen with open ears. And the thing is, there's going to be someone listening who agrees with everything Noel said and someone who agrees with everything I said. And that's great. And I would like to hear from you if you want to share anything with me. But I just think, again, that overall, I'm really proud of this podcast, this episode, but the podcast in general, but this episode, and just how two people were able to talk to each other. And I had a great time with Noel. I think he's funny. I hope if I ever do comedy in Tennessee, where he lives, that, we'll meet and he'll come out and see that. And, he's one of the guests I do hope to meet one day. But just here's the podcast and enjoy. And thanks again for being here this week. Welcome to More Than Work, the podcast reminding you that your self-worth is defined by more than your job title. I'm Rabia, an IT project manager, comedian, nonprofit volunteer, and sometimes activist. Every week, I'll chat with a guest about pursuing passions outside of work or creating meaningful opportunities inside their workplace. As you listen, I hope you'll be inspired to do the same. All right, welcome back, everyone. This week I have a guest whose podcast I'll actually be on too, so I'll put that link out for everyone to see, and I definitely recommend it. I've listened to quite a few of his episodes. It's Noel Bagwell. He's the founder of ExecutiveLP and the creator of Profit from Legal. How's it going, Noel?
Pretty good. And so you're the one. You're the one who's been listening to podcasts. Thanks for that.
The one in the UK.
Yeah, well, we have an audience in 6 countries now, so it's growing. We've only been doing Profit from Legal since January 17th, so I joke about the audience being small, but it really is growing, and for just the very short period of time we've been doing it, it's been growing pretty rapidly. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, it's definitely a slow burn from what everyone says on the podcast growth, and then you will see. I have a friend who has a podcast. She's British, she's Welsh actually, but she has a big audience in Mexico, and she's not sure why this happened. So it's funny to see how that goes.
Is Wales if the United Kingdom were North America, would Wales be the Mexico? Would they be?
Well,
or I'm trying to draw a cultural parallel? Or
they're part of the United Kingdom. They'd be like maybe Alaska in a way.
Alaska,
in a way, maybe because I don't know, just
because they're separate but part of it.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah, something
Guam?
like that.
No, not
well,
quite
Prince
Guam.
Charles is the Prince of Wales.
Prince of Wales,
and they have their own language there and their own accent,
which is
really
cool. Mm-hmm. My middle name Reese is actually it goes back. It's Reese, but before that, in previous generations, it was Rees, and I think before that it was Rhys, which is Welsh. Yeah. So going back generations through my ancestry or whatever on Ancestry.com, it's kind of cool to see the progression. And a lot of my genetic makeup is a mixture of English, Irish, French, and Native American. So I did that. My dad got us all the Ancestry DNA things for Christmas a couple years ago. And so it's been really interesting to see my map of my DNA marker map kind of expand as they continue to do research. Yeah,
and it changes. I did that too, and my mom got super annoyed because all of a sudden I came up as 12% Italian, and then I just accused her why didn't you tell me I was Italian? And
but did you accuse her?
No, I started saying. I was kind of probably being offensive, but first I said, I told her I'm Italian. She goes, well, that's definitely your dad's side. So she was very defensive about that. Then I started doing Godfather, and she'd be annoyed at the neighbor. I'd like. Oh, what do you want me to do to them, Mom? I'll take care of it for you. And she'd get so annoyed, and then, what do you want for dinner? I'd say, oh, I want pizza. I want pasta. And she just gets it got old.
I noticed they added an emoji for the classic Italian hand gesture, which you're not recording video, so you can't see me doing the hand thing. But I noticed there's now an emoji for that. And I just thought this is the best. This is the best of the new emojis that have been recently released. It
is, because it's definitely a mood,
Yeah, it is a mood. It's a hardcore mood.
Yeah, I heard you were talking about me.
Yeah, don't make me come over there, and then you... Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That's good. So, let's get to it.
Sure.
You're a lawyer. So if I say, my guest is a lawyer...
Yeah, I need to put on my wig. My wig and my robes. Yeah.
You're a barrister. But yeah, so I have quite a few friends who are lawyers actually, or
I'm sorry.
Law.
I apologize just on behalf of all of us. Yeah. Sorry about that.
But you went into a different aspect of it than them. They're all different places you could go. So talk about the space you're in and how you founded Profit for Legal. From legal. Sorry.
I hate lawsuits. I hate the billable hour. So I'm just going to talk about all the things I hate. People are like, why the hell did you go to law school? You hate lawsuits. You hate the billable hour. What the hell are you even doing as a lawyer then? And I originally wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I still want to be. I still am an entrepreneur. I consider myself a lawyerpreneur, if you will. So a bit of an entrepreneur first, and then law is my medium. So just like a painter or a sculptor might say, I'm an artist. I think I'm an entrepreneur in the way that they're an artist, and law is just the medium. Whenever I get out in the world and talk to people, often, if I go to networking events or whatever, people are like, oh, you don't talk like a lawyer, you don't look like a lawyer, you don't act like a lawyer. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And I think for a lot of people, what they expect is me to have a somewhat large flagpole-sized stick up my ass. And for me to just be like aloof and condescending maybe a little bit, or just hard to talk to and unapproachable. I think they have that impression of lawyers, and that's really unfortunate because we're really not like that, most of us. I mean, lawyers are careful, but really when it boils down to it, lawyers are the kids who, when they played board games as a child, they read the underside of the box top that had all the rules, and they just wanted to play by the rules. And that's what we do, is we help people understand the rules by which they're playing. And we also help them understand that just because you didn't read the rules to the game doesn't mean you can play the game however you want. Just because you're not aware of the rules doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want. Like if I just ignore the law, it'll go away. That's not the way it works. You have to actually play by the rules, or it's going to catch up to you at some point. And I believe what Yvon Chouinard said. He's the founder of Patagonia clothing line. He's an American rock climber, French-Canadian descent. Really sharp guy, billionaire. Gives 1% of, I think Patagonia gives 1% of all their revenue to environmental charity. So it's just, he's a good guy. But he said, profit is what happens when you get everything else right. And I think that for entrepreneurs, I'm on a mission to show them that you can get everything else right in your business. You can have the legal support that you need, and that can still be profitable. Like legal doesn't have to just be a cost center for your business, which is the way they see it. They want to ignore the rules. They don't want to do things the right way because they think it's going to be too expensive. It's going to be too costly. Oh, we don't want to get the lawyers involved. The price of everything goes up and it just gets impossible to do stuff. That's the wrong idea. That's the wrong approach. It's not really like that. In fact, doing things the right way is actually more profitable, and it's more profitable to do it the right way in advance than to not do it the right way and then encounter a problem that you have to fix. It's more expensive to fix the problem than it would be to prevent it in the first place. So I'm just on a mission to change the way people think about legal services and thereby change the way they use legal services, and I believe that they can actually profit from having preventive legal support. But that requires them to change the way they think and the way they're approaching using legal services. So that's what my podcast is all about, and what the new Profit from Legal product from ExecutiveLP is all about.
That makes sense. And I mean, do you agree that a lot of times people treat a lawyer almost like some people treat a doctor, like they don't call them until they need them, and then it's usually a bit late, or it can be a bit late, or it's a bit more difficult.
Yeah. Well, my wife told me, or asked me the other day, I was having like a high elevated heart rate. My Apple Watch, I felt it, before I was just not a hypochondriac that just lives my life by my Apple Watch, but like I had just this weird rapid heart rate. It was like 106, and then it was like 108, and then my toddler and I took a walk, and I came back, and it was like 123, and I was like, oh my God, what the heck is going on? And I knew exactly what it was because my Apple Watch was telling me, but I felt bad, and my wife said, why don't you go to the doctor? Do you need to go to the doctor? And I was like, why? What are they? I'm going to pay them a couple $100, and what the hell are they going to do about it? They're not going to do anything about it. Like, what could they do about it? Nothing. There's nothing they can do. And part of that is my own ignorance, because there probably was something that they could do, But for me, it was just like what I imagined they could do, and the benefit of that wasn't worth me having to actually, for one thing, go to their office and wait. And like Jerry Seinfeld said, they have the waiting room. There's zero chance of you not waiting. You're going to wait. That's why they call it the waiting room. That's what it's for. Like he's absolutely right about that. I don't want to go and sit in the doctor's office, wait to see the doctor, if you can even get an appointment.
Yeah, especially now.
Right. Well, I mean, you guys are under lockdown for serious, but here in Nashville, I mean, it's still a pain with all the COVID protocols and all that. And you spend all that money, all that effort, all that time for what? You need to drink more water, maybe take a nap, or like here's some aspirin, Like, I feel like WebMD would do just as good a job. And I know that somewhere my sister, who's a physician's assistant, and my other sister, who's a pharmacist, are probably like, no, that's wrong. They probably want to give me hell over that. But it is the way I feel. And I feel like people think of lawyers the same way. And the only cure for that, pardon the pun, is just better education about what benefits a lawyer can provide and exactly how they would do it, and not to the point where people are going to try to do it themselves, botch the job, and then, have an expensive fix required, but enough that they can at least say, okay, well, if I go and I talk to this professional, they can provide meaningful relief to this very specific problem that I have, and that there's actually a legit methodology for it. They're not just going to tell me, yeah, you're out of shape, boy, eat better and exercise. I don't want to pay $300 for eat better and exercise. I know that.
Yeah.
And with the law, it's, people don't realize that it's not just pure legal either. Like, there's legal operations, which is, aligning legal services with enterprise goals, and, translating from legal to English and business to legal, and getting everybody on the same page and aligned together. There's legal operations, there's the legal department, there's the business function, and they all need to be working hand in glove for everything to be optimal.
Did you, when you went to law school and you were thinking about being a lawyer, I guess before then, what did you think you were going to be doing as a lawyer versus what you're doing now?
I thought I was going to be positioned after graduating law school to get maybe an associate general counsel job or assistant general counsel job at a company and work my way up. And hopefully, if I was really good at what I did and I learned a lot and I provided a lot of value to my employer, to someday become general counsel or chief legal officer for a company, hopefully a relatively medium to large size company, and be really successful. I mean, you always hope for the best, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard not to be ambitious. It's hard for someone like me not to be ambitious. And I used to jokingly say that law school is where narcissists go to become sociopaths. So for lawyers, it's really hard not to be ambitious. But it's probably unfair and a bit cynical to lawyers. I think very few of them are sociopaths, and probably fewer than you think are narcissists. So, but it's still funny. I'd say a lot of lawyers are ambitious. They want to win, but a lot of that ambition isn't just for themselves. It's because they actually go to law school to make a dent in the universe. They want to leave a mark. They want some kind of legacy. They want to serve their clients, and mm-hmm. you would be surprised. Like, a lot of people think of lawyers as sort of sharks in suits, money grubbing, winning obsessed people. And really what they're obsessed with at a core level is justice for their clients. Like, you can't be a successful lawyer and not be obsessed with justice. Like, that has to be your driving force, because any other motivation will burn you out very quickly. And I'd say usually 5 to 7 years burn out if you're not obsessed with justice and good outcomes for your clients. For me, that manifests as, wanting to see my clients outgrow me, wanting to see my clients grow their profitability, their revenues, their market share, to the point where they don't have, an outsourced solution. Now they have in-house counsel. And so I've started building Profit from Legal both to help them get to that point, and then to optimize their relationship with their in-house counsel when they have it. But Profit from Legal is great as a foundation. Even if a client isn't quite there yet, it's a good foundation for laying down the legal operations, systems, and processes that need to be in place for them to get the most out of counsel when they hire an outside general counsel attorney to advise them and provide legal services. It's also great to optimize the relationship with outside general counsel if they already have it, or their in-house legal department, because Profit from Legal really is it's legal operations install, as it were. And so we lay down all those systems and processes. You teach them about key performance indicators, and then show them and work with them to implement those key performance indicator reporting processes in their business so that they can get the most out of the legal counsel. For me, that means improved access to the legal support they need. It's unjust, it's unfair for big companies to have legal support and the little guys to go without. And I think 50% of consumers, U.S. consumers, have a significant legal event every year, and 80% of them go without a lawyer. Something like 30% of small businesses that have a significant legal event don't hire a lawyer. It's a $79 billion problem. And for me, that means the legal industry is leaving almost $80 billion on the table every year. And I think everyone has adequate incentives. Lawyers have adequate incentives. Small businesses have adequate incentives to solve that problem. But nobody wants to have a conversation about value-based fees and communicating return on investment on legal services to the client. Instead, people are entrenched in and attached to this antiquated, archaic business model of trading time for dollars, the billable hour. And I hate the billable hour. I think it's a cancer, because you're not going to, if you're a small business owner, you're not going to call your lawyer if it's the average hourly rate's almost $300 an hour. And so if it's almost $60 for a 12-minute phone call, you're not going to call that lawyer unless your hair's on fire. But if the lawyer is providing unlimited remote legal consultation service on a subscription basis, why wouldn't you call them? You're paying for the subscription fee. Use it as much as you need to. It's not going to cost you any different. So I think there's a better business model for basic legal services for small businesses. And, we're out there pioneering what that looks like and have been since 2013. We were doing virtual practice before COVID. I mean, we've been doing virtual practice since effectively 2014. So we've been out in front of the trend for years. And now we're doing, legal profitability development for small businesses. And this is happening, by the way, this is happening for big businesses already. Like we're not reinventing the wheel. This is something that exists. It's just not something that exists for small businesses, small to medium businesses. If you're in that $10 million to $50 million range, this is all news to you. But if you're in a much bigger business, 50 million, 100 million or more in revenue, this is it's not quite old hat, but I'd say north of 80% of businesses of that size already have legal operations. That's part of their legal department and all of that. It's the little guys that get left out. And that's where justice isn't being served for me. I want to see the little guys have the same support and opportunities that the big companies have.
Mm-hmm. Was there a shift for you? Like, did you start out as a general counsel or assistant counsel somewhere and then move on from that, or did you just kind of over time change your mind about who you wanted to help?
Well, when I was second year in law school, I clerked for an attorney, like you do, and he was general counsel for 2 regional banks. And when I graduated, I graduated a semester early from law school. I took a bunch of summer classes, and I just tried to get out as fast as I could, get to practice as soon as I could. And so whenever I graduated, I took the bar in February. I graduated December, took the bar in February, got my results in April. I had passed, and the lawyer I had clerked with said, okay, you can come and work with me as an associate in my practice, where he was doing some like real estate, creditors' rights in bankruptcy, some, general counsel work for the banks and that sort of thing. You can work for me in my practice, or you can rent some space for me in my building. He had an office available for rent. And, I had wanted to be an entrepreneur for a long time. I'd wanted to be my own boss. I didn't want to be beholden to somebody else. And I remember asking him, so if there's money in the trust account from a settlement and the client needs a check and you're on vacation, will the client have to wait, or will I have the authority to write them a check? Mm-hmm. And he said, no, you'll have to wait. You're not going to have signing authority on the trust account because I'm responsible for that, and so on. And I said, well, I respect that. And if I were in your position, I'd probably feel the same way. But I don't want my client to have to wait. I don't want to have that issue, even though it may be unlikely or whatever, you can downplay it however you want. But for me, I was really thinking already at that point about the impact on the client of having to wait for approval from higher up, and how that would put me in the middle. And I just thought, well, I'll just rent some space from him. The rent was cheap. He's a great guy. Love him to death. He's just a really great person, and a good lawyer. And I appreciated the job offer, but ultimately I took option 2. I just hung my shingle out and immediately regretted it. Immediately was like, this was a terrible idea. I think my first year in practice, I made something like $12,000. I mean, my wife was working. When I was in law school, she worked at the university where the law school was, and she worked for the divinity school that was on campus there, and she got a tuition benefit, so she got her MBA at the same time that I got my JD, and we graduated at the same time. And I'm just super proud of her. She's a rock star. And so thankfully, she got a good job as well, and so we were able to make it while I was building my practice. But that first year was really brutal, and I was really not just miserable because I wasn't making very much money, and because I didn't have a client base. I was just having to build it all from scratch, from square one, like literally 0 to 1, like bootstrapping with no startup capital, no marketing budget, no nothing, no help, no support. It was just me and a computer in a room. And a suit, doing my best, right? Like, I got on the list for court-appointed cases, and so I was taking court-appointed cases, so people who said, I can't afford a lawyer, even if they could afford a lawyer, they said they couldn't, and then the court system would appoint them to me, and the state would pay me a paltry sum to defend them. And so I was taking stuff like that, guardian ad litem cases, solicitor ad litem cases, where, you're appointed to represent someone who's been accused of abusing children or something like that. And, that was just brutal. I got off that list as quickly as I could because there were just some really rough things. I saw some rough stuff. And it was not at all what I went to law school for. In law school, I took all the business law courses. I didn't take family law. I didn't take environmental law. I didn't take, the kinds of courses that people take to boost their GPA so that they're in the top 20% of the class and get recruited by a big law firm. Instead, I took things like securities regulation and corporate finance and uniform commercial code. And I took all of that I could so that I would have all the business law knowledge that I could cram into my brain so I would be useful to an employer in the future. That was what I was out to do, and instead I ended up, defending a meth cook in General Sessions Court of First Impression. And just stuff that wasn't at all what I wanted to do and had no interest in, and I was miserable. But I had a few clients, small business clients, who brought matters through, across my desk. And I would ask them, why didn't you just hire a lawyer in the first place? Like, you're now in this lawsuit for several $1,000s, but you could have prevented this for a couple $100. And they say, what? Come again? What? And I'd say, it's really cheap to prevent this kind of thing from happening. But the trick is you have to call the lawyer before you have the lawsuit. You need to talk to someone in advance, and everybody has risks. But the difference between a risk and a problem is having the right lawyer there in advance. And you've got to put that in place. And they're like, well, it's just prohibitively expensive. And I'd say, well, would you pay, $400 a month to just have someone that you could talk to, unlimited, no limits? All your legal research would be included. All of your, remote legal consultation would be included. Any de minimis services, anything that it's like 20 minutes or less to get taken care of, that's automatically included. Would you pay like $400 a month for that? No. Hell yeah, I'd pay, $500, $600, $700 a month for that. Would be well worth it, just for the peace of mind and the unlimited service. And I'm like, I'll be your Huckleberry, we can do that. So the idea for subscription-based outside general counsel service for very small businesses was born out of that experience of asking clients, well, what would you want your relationship with your lawyer to look like, and what would be the right price point? There was a lot of trial and error, too, in developing what we now call our Legal Lifeline service. And then we spent a couple years developing Signet Outside General Counsel, which is a scalable, very robust outside general counsel solution. And the scope of the work and the scale of the cost, the fee, scales with the size of the business. And it's a true value-based fee that's driven by statistical data on what businesses actually spend on legal services, because we believe everything is worth what its purchaser will pay for it. So we use actual data on that to fuel the algorithm and the value-based fee. I didn't always want to do this. I did always want to be my own boss, but it was just sort of, you could say luck, but it's, luck is really just a function of preparation and opportunity. Those are the two elements of luck. It's when preparation meets opportunity. I had been somewhat prepared in some ways, and then I had the opportunity to see the need for this in a very small business context. And so what I wanted to do for one big company, I now do for a lot of little companies, or several, I shouldn't say a lot, but several little companies. We actually have a soft cap. It's not a hard and fast rule, but our target client to attorney ratio is 10 to 1. So for every attorney with 10 clients. If it gets more than that, there needs to be a good reason.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's just cool that, first of all, I think just in a way, I mean, it sounds really rough, but you had the opportunity to see, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
You went and did it and knew you didn't want to. I had planned to go to law school, like, since I was 10, right? That was what I was going to do. Be a lawyer and be president was the next thing, but that's not going to happen. I don't want people leaking whatever I have on the internet. And so,
right. Yeah.
you know, it's like, but, I actually interned at the DA's office local in my hometown, in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, and they didn't want me there. Actually, the deputy DA, he was like, thought I was ridiculous. I would show up, I went to the office with my resume and I got dressed up. And I said, I'd like to be an intern here. I didn't know what I was doing. And he's like, well, you're not a law student. Like, no, you're not. You can't do that. Come back in a few years. And I said, okay, fine. So then I just started hanging out in the courtroom. It was so ridiculous, like this 19-year-old kid. And I sat there every day, and he would see me, and I'd say hi to him. And then finally he came at the end of the week, because what are you doing? I said, well, I can still study. Like, I can still learn just by sitting here, so I'll just be here. And he's like, all right, just come in. And it ended up being this awesome experience. I got to do what all the law students were doing.
That's
cool.
I
was willing to do it.
Yeah.
But what happened was I thought I wanted to be a DA, because I thought I'm going to make sure that the bad guys go away. Well, then you start to find things out, like, it's not that black and white.
Yeah.
At all. And you have the experience where, like, for example, and you'll understand this because of stuff you had to do, I couldn't be in the courtroom one day. There were no women allowed because of the guy that they brought in. It was pretty scary.
Yeah.
No women in the courtroom. And then one time, near the end of it, two guys I went to high school with and to junior high with were being indicted for murder one. And that impacted me. I looked at them and I was like,
because you knew them.
Guys.
You'd been in school with them. Yeah.
I knew them. I even knew why.
Yeah.
There was these gangs in our town.
Yeah.
And I knew whose death they were avenging.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with murder at all, just to be clear to anyone listening. But I knew all of it. And it just wasn't as simple anymore.
No.
And then I just changed what I wanted to do, which I'm still not doing. But yeah, so I get, like, just how those experiences change you and you working with certain people, and especially if you're working with people like you had to.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it's just good, though, that you had that opportunity to at least see, so you knew. And then,
well, it's funny too, because my dad practiced law for almost 20 years, 19 years, and he did criminal defense, medical malpractice, and personal injury. So I grew up, with my dad, who had a very successful practice having these kinds of cases, and I always kind of looked at, it's probably awful to say this, the voice of white male privilege or whatever, if you want to call it that, but I always kind of grew up looking down a little bit on some of the, especially criminal defense clients. I thought that's a lower class of people. It's people who have no impulse control and they had no self-control. And so, I was kind of judgy towards them. And, of course, I don't think people do bad things or criminal things necessarily because they want to be bad. Some people do. And some people have no remorse, no conscience, and they're, they've got something wrong with their mind, their psychology. But then I think most people who end up on the wrong side of the law are driven to it by complex forces, both internal and external. It's not cut and dried, as you say. And it's funny because this plays out sometimes over decades. And my dad, his father was our district attorney in our hometown for 16 years. He served 2 terms as district attorney. And it was funny because he spent almost 20 years putting away the quote-unquote bad guys. And then when he went into private practice, he started doing criminal defense work.
Wow.
And he started defending some of the people he had put away before. And he was like,
yeah.
Some of these guys, they're not that bad. Like, they're just, like he had a completely different view of them and a different experience of them when he got into private practice as a criminal defense lawyer than he had putting them away. Your perspective really does change, and the law requires, if you want to be a really good lawyer, it requires you to entertain 2 conflicting thoughts in your mind at the same time. We were always taught in law school, argue yes, argue no. Be able to understand the other side's point of view, know what their argument is going to be, because you can't beat their argument if you don't understand their argument from their perspective. You have to see it from their point of view. It requires a high degree of what some people would call empathy. And it probably is really pure empathy, honestly, understanding someone else's point of view, being able to argue in their shoes. But, for me, empathy is an exercise in imagination. It's how I, from my perspective, imagine someone else feels, but I can never really put myself in their shoes. So for me, empathy always feels a bit disingenuous. I really like what Paul Bloom talked about in his book, Rational Compassion, how even when you can't see things from the other person's perspective, even if you can't really understand how a person could get to a point where they would do something horrible, you still have compassion for them, because at bottom, even if they're a bad person, they're a person. They're a human being, and they have intrinsic value as a human. And so you should love them in a general way, just respect for all life and that kind of a love, and show compassion and mercy to them, and hope that if they've done something horrible, they get the psychological help they need. Because clearly there's, like you pointed out, things aren't cut and dried. It's not just that they're good people and bad people. It's that, even good people can be driven to do horrible things, or can be beaten down over the course of their whole life through abuse and external forces that shape them into what we might consider to be a monster, if we didn't realize that there's probably a person in there being tortured by themselves and everything that they've been through.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. And I think, so when I think of lawyers a lot of the time, I actually still have this view of like the people I worked with when I was a kid, and got the chance to meet and all that. So is there, once you were like, now you're doing what you want to do, or a version of it, it's like you wanted to help people and you wanted to be a counselor for businesses. Now you are, just in a different way.
In a different way, yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of the cool thing. I mean, I think a lot of times we'll have an idea of what we want to do, but it'll show up in a different way if we take advantage of that, or if we go ahead and say, yeah, this kind of actually is what I wanted to do, but just not how I envisioned it, I suppose, right? Like you're not sitting in a boardroom of some Fortune 5 or something.
And thank God, right? Thank God that I didn't end up where I thought I wanted to be, because if I had, I would have to deal with a lot of stuff right now that I would have zero tolerance for and zero patience for. Like there are some just basic denials of reality that a lot of corporate culture engages in, and I'm just like, you're basically looking at the facts and denying that's a thing. And I can't deal with people being irrational. Like I can't accept it. I can acknowledge it, and I can have compassion for those people, and I can hope that they'll change, and I'll try to persuade them. But like if I was subject to their authority and they said, this is our corporate policy, we're gonna go in this direction, and I disagreed with it, I would be one of those people that would have to resign and protest. Like I would be like St. Thomas More. I'd say, I die the king's good servant, but God's first. Just put my principles ahead of even my own career. And right now I'm responsible for a beautiful little boy and his life, and his mother, my wife. I've got a family that I'm responsible for. And so I think for me the right answer is to be able to have the freedom to accept working with people who are willing to accept me, and say no to things that where I know there's going to be so much conflict with that person that they're not going to like me, they're not going to accept my worldview, or they need me to be woke and I'm not woke, or whatever, and so we just can't work together. Like it's funny because these are challenges that I never really thought we would have at this point in American life. I really thought that we were trending towards more unity and inclusiveness, concern for others, consideration, tolerance, and not acceptance of other people's ideology in the sense that I am forced to agree with you, but acceptance of the fact that even if I disagree with you, we can still love each other and care about each other. I thought that was where we were going in society. Like as a kid in the late 90s, when I was graduating college in year 2000, I thought that's where things were headed. And over the last 20 years, we've not been headed in that direction. We've been headed 180 degrees in the other direction towards, less acceptance of others, less consideration for others, more division, and sort of like being in these echo chambers where we don't listen to the other side. And I think that's deeply troubling for me and for a lot of people. And I'm the kind of person that even if I disagree with you, I love you as a human being, and I want good things for you in your life, and I will still help you out in business. But I'm learning that things are not that way. And as we see cancel culture wreaking havoc in corporate America, I'm really glad that I didn't end up there, because I'm concerned that I would be one of the people that would be canceled. Not because I'm a bad person, but because I just am not going to say that things are true when I don't believe they are. It's like that's what's required now, and I think that's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what's being canceled. Like,
yeah,
that's the thing. Like,
well,
some
like the
people
guy
cancel themselves. Like,
some people do cancel themselves, and they deserve it.
You make that choice, like, or you just make a choice, and then that's the choice you made. Like, that's it. You made a choice to.
Like last week, let's just take an example. Like Robert Aaron Long, the monster, like horrible person, right? Who in Georgia shot up a bunch of massage therapy businesses. Yeah, he went in there and shot that up. Well, immediately when he did that, Stop Asian Hate was like trending all over Twitter, and white supremacy was trending on Twitter, and they were basically saying that because this white guy shot up a bunch of Asian massage therapy places, that he was a racist, mass murdering monster. Well, it turns out that he was the son of a fundamentalist evangelical Protestant minister, and he was raised very religious, and he had had problems with sexual addiction and that sort of thing, and he had really struggled with that, and he had frequented some of those establishments that weren't entirely doing what they were supposed to be doing, right? Like they weren't just massage places. So he was going there, and he saw those as sources of temptation to what he perceived to be sin. And so he saw them as like dens of iniquity. And so his violent, atrocious behavior had nothing to do with racism. It had everything to do with self-hatred, which is a deep-seated psychological problem, with his religious upbringing, with his perception of them as, occasions to, near occasions of sin, so he saw them as like temptations that he needed to eliminate. There's a psychological, pathological problem there. Like that's mental illness. And he needed compassion, and he needed treatment. He needed to seek help. But because he didn't get the help that he needed, he did something horrible. But it had nothing to do with white supremacy. It had nothing to do with racism of any kind. It had everything to do with the fact that he was a broken person who hated himself. And, this was, but it didn't stop the woke mob on Twitter from jumping to conclusions and making it about racism when it wasn't about racism. And so, anytime a person speaks out and says, hey, this particular instance wasn't really about racism, they're like, the woke mob responds, well, why are you defending racism? It's like, we're not defending racism, we're defending reason and trying to say, look, yes, white supremacy is bad, but it's not relevant to this particular crime. This was an atrocity, but it wasn't a hate crime as as we define hate crime. That's not what hate crime means. And yeah, he may have hated the people he killed, but not based on their race, but based on what he perceived as, sinful behavior or whatever. And that's part of his religious shit that he had going on. It wasn't like, a racist motivation. So it's very difficult. Like I have friends who I would talk about these things privately with, and they'd say, well, because of where I work, I would never post on Twitter about that. I would never render an opinion, even in defense of sanity, even in defense of, hey, we need to make sure that when we're condemning racist attacks, that those attacks really are racist, because when we condemn racism, when racism isn't the underlying motivation, it actually dilutes the argument. It dilutes the potency of the argument against racism, which is a good and valuable thing. We want to fight racism, but we can't do it effectively if we're diluting it by saying that's racist when things aren't really racist. Like, we need to be clear in our arguments, and this is, I guess, part of my legal training of issue spotting and like sticking to the facts and using logic and good sound argument. It's about supporting the right things for the right reason, the right way. And in business, I do the same thing. It's, a focus on profitability that happens when you get everything else right. Profit's what happens when you get everything else right. And that's true when it comes to pecuniary profit in your business, but it's also true in the sense that profit is something that's beneficial if something is profitable for you, it's generally beneficial. And the things that are most beneficial in life and in society are the things that accrue to us when we get all these other things right, when we get the arguments right, when we have good critical thinking skills, when we have, the right virtuous attitudes towards other people and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I do need to address something, because I don't want people to listen to this and think that I at all condone the whole use of woke mob or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I need to address that.
Oh, the terminology. Yeah, sure.
Well, I just need to address all of it really quick. And I will. So the whole thing is, it appeared to be a crime against Asian people at first. That's what it appeared to be. Asian women are often seen in this light of being treated in a certain way in society, especially by men, especially sexually. So that and these can be, body workers, they can be sex workers, they can be whatever, They're not advertising, obviously, that's what it's about, but someone's paying someone for something. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
There are no real protections for sex workers at all, because a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that industry exists, and it does. And so
in the same way, there aren't really
danger.
Any legal protections for like drug dealers, because that activity is also illegal. So we don't really tend to legally protect things that are illegal.
But there's there are people that seek these services.
Sure.
Right? So it appeared to be a crime against Asian people. Also, there have been an increase in hate crimes against Asian people. They're not covered by the media in the same way crimes against other races are.
That's true.
There's a silence around it. So what it did was, I think, it woke, not in the same sense, people up to this happening. Because then it was like all of a sudden, oh, this has happened, this has happened. I have a friend whose sister was kicked on the New York subway about 6 months ago. Why? She's Asian. That's why.
And that's terrible.
Right? And
it should never happen.
But
that
you know what? You'll
never
never hear about it, because for some reason, the Asian community is not treated in the same way as other communities of other races are.
Yeah.
As far as highlighting their things. So I think what happened was, he says it wasn't a race thing. Fine. He says he's a sex addict and that he decided to go shoot people and kill them and kill, that one lady has 2 teenage kids.
There's never any excuse for any of that kind of stuff, but there's also not an excuse for the rush to judgment. And that's what I condemn, is the rush to judgment without all the facts.
Right, and that happens, and that's the nature of the media now and stuff. So I can acknowledge that, yes, he didn't specifically do a crime against people. They just happen to all be the same. That happens to be who was working there.
Yeah.
But, and I agree that, there is a danger, and I'm not 100%, I'm not a cancel culture person, because I think, first of all, people can say things maybe 10 years ago, they could have said something that in society 10 years ago was accepted.
Right.
Okay to say. And there's even characters on TV shows, and on Two Broke Girls, there's this Asian character. You wouldn't treat a character who's Asian like that now, because we've evolved, or some of us have. I'd say some
culturally
have
evolved. Yeah, some people have.
Right.
Some people are still
and
kind of the Archie Bunkers, right? But they're not.
And they're getting canceled.
They're getting canceled. Yeah.
And they should. People who still use the N-word. It's there is no question. Anyone who's 30 years old, for example, we're older than that.
Yeah.
Anyone who's 30 years old, and white, put it that way, it has never been acceptable in their entire lifetime.
Never in their whole life, right?
In their whole life. There's never. Now, someone who's 80, now it was never okay, in the sense that it was okay, but it was something that actually was a word that they grew up with, and at some point they didn't evolve past it.
My grandmother would say it was tacky.
It
was tacky, but it's not wrong. It was just sort of don't be vulgar, don't be crude. It was like a vulgar thing to use the N-word, but there's a difference between vulgarity or just being rude and being a member of the Klan is the way it's treated now. It's just a ridiculous.
Yeah. So I agree with that, but it's just hard because I think I know why the reaction happened, and I think then it was this. It's kind of like what's been happening. There's these pressure points that are being hit that are exploding things, right? And that's the hard part. And do
you think that's intentional? Do you think that people are being intentionally manipulated by social media algorithms and the media to be whipped into a frenzy for the purpose? Because the more hype there is, the more media, frenzy there is, the more all of this there is on social media, the more the advertising companies make and the social media company, the more money they make. Like the more attention you have, the more you're sucked into Twitter or you're sucked into Facebook or Instagram or whatever over, you're following all these hashtags and you've got a high level of engagement. You're seeing more ad revenue. And if you're not buying it and you're not selling it, guess what? You're the product being sold. Do you think that this is intentional, that the tools that are being used are actually using us?
Oh, for sure. And I think like a good example of I think people have good intentions, right? Like people, I'm not saying companies, I'm saying people. Sure,
yeah, I think so.
Like if I didn't change my profile picture, but I could have. A lot of people change their profile picture to have some circle around it that says like, stop hate in whatever situation it is.
Yeah.
There was that whole black square thing last year.
Yeah.
That, well, you know what? The black community, from what I understand, and I can't speak for the black community, but I can say what I've read, and the Black Lives Matter people didn't want everyone changing their profile to a black square. What happened was their hashtag got polluted by everybody. And that was the intention was, because the intention was that the music industry, the black entertainers were going to do that.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being everybody. And so I think the intentions of everybody was good. It was to show support. But it's a matter of, to me, asking the people what support, how can I serve?
How can I help you? Yeah, how can I be an ally?
Don't ask them, tell me about the racism you've experienced, or why do you think people are racist?
That's so cringy. That's so cringy.
It is, but ask them, how can I help? I want to be an ally. Yeah. What can I do? And you do the research. And I think what's missing, and I think the Asian population now, I talked to one of my friends who...
They probably want to say, just don't kick me on the subway, just let me live my life unmolested.
Yeah, or don't hit old people. And now old people are being escorted. Like in San Francisco, I'm pretty sure, a guy started a community of people who escort old people on their walk just so they're not attacked.
Which is
that's
good.
Real. And that's real stuff that's happening.
And you know what? That's been happening for years, though. Like when I was in law school, I wrote a paper on and studied the trend of, in the time, it was like circa 2009, 2010, there was this trend for flash mob violence. And the media did a horrible job of reporting on it because it didn't fit their narrative. They did not want, during the last years of the Obama administration, they did not want it reported that, well, I guess it was the middle of the Obama administration, it was 2009, 2010. They didn't want it reported that largely minority youths were engaging in these flash mobs where they would run up and they would play the knockout game. They would just run up on an unsuspecting person, punch them in the back of the head, try to knock them out in one hit. And they were doing things like all converging on like a convenience store and just looting it in 30 seconds and then out. And they were organizing this through social media. They were organizing it through different social media platforms. And they were just like, okay, we're going to hit this place. We're all going to show up like a Macy's. And it was all over security cam footage. There was no question about which demographic groups were participating. Like that was all just a matter of security cam footage. But the media quietly suppressed it. They stopped reporting the stories. They wouldn't report on the ethnicity of the people involved. And then they stopped showing the security cam footage. They started just going to text-based reports of urban youths engaging in these kinds of things, if they reported it at all. And there was a website that was tracking all of these things and like had all the statistical data, and that got canceled. It was just like the things that don't fit the narrative don't get reported, just like you're talking about the Stop Asian Hate. The media doesn't report on it in the same way because it doesn't fit the narrative. And my issue, number one, is with hating anybody because of who they are, no matter what. Full stop. It's, if you hate anyone because of inherent characteristics or inborn traits, that makes you a bad person. You need to stop that and, re-examine your life. And certainly if you would allow that to motivate you to any kind of discrimination or, God forbid, violence, then that's just horrible. And I would just uniformly condemn any of that kind of behavior, regardless of who's doing it or who's on the receiving end of that kind of awfulness. But the problem that I have is with the way the media spins it, the way the media reports on it or chooses not to report on it, as the case may be. They pick winners and losers in the culture war and in the social game. And really the media has more power to do that than even the government or private citizens or anybody. And we need to hold journalism accountable, and we need objectivity and transparency in journalism. And that's not something that we have, even with social media, because the social media companies, you can say, oh, well, everyone's a journalist now because we all have cell phones and Twitter. But the Twitter algorithms, the social media algorithms, are now doing what establishment journos have done for a long time, which is pick the narrative. And I think that that's horrible because it does everyone a grave disservice. You can't make informed decisions or, cultural values decisions or whatever when the media that's being fed to you and the narrative and the information being fed to you is so skewed by these companies.
Well, yeah, we all choose our echo chamber at this point.
Right. Yeah. Except for me, because I'm just sort of like opting out. Like I've kind of just I'll go into Facebook now. You can go into the Facebook ad settings, and I've started encouraging friends to do this. Go into the Facebook ad settings and just start purging everything. Just tell Facebook, no, you can't track me. You can't do any of these things. Just set it to the very most restrictive thing. No, I don't want targeted ads. Start hiding all the advertisers that they've shown you. And anytime you see an ad, hide it and ban it. So I never want to see ads from this person again. And not on any kind of principle, just any kind of ad.
Yeah, any ad. Yeah.
Any ad, no matter what it is. Fuck with the algorithm, excuse my language, but mess with their algorithm and just go through there and start undermining the algorithms everywhere. Like as an act of protest, I think everybody should do it on every, and also pick a platform and stick with it. Don't be on every platform. I'm on LinkedIn. It's probably the only place I have any meaningful engagement outside of a couple of private Facebook groups. I'm on Facebook because my grandmother's on Facebook, and I don't want her to miss out on my kid's life, right? That's her window on the world. And so I'm there. I'm basically on Facebook because Boomer plus family members are, Boomer and older family members are on Facebook, and it's a good place to share pictures. But we largely do that in a private Facebook groups. My engagement outside of that is almost none these days, and I just encourage people to not use those platforms as much, especially after watching The Social Dilemma, right? Like if you've seen that, now you ought to be aware you're being used. And I think a lot of the sort of culture wars that we're engaging in it's not because people are like bad people or they disagree or whatever. It's because they're being manipulated. And I just don't want people to be pawns in a game that really has nothing to do with their best interests.
Yeah, no, I understand. And we did have a tangent, but that's fine.
Well, this is more than work. It's more than work.
Well,
we're not just here to talk about work. We're here to talk about life, right? And it is activism. It is work. It is. We've had some fun too, and so it's great to be able to talk about these things. And I know you and I probably ideologically don't necessarily see eye to eye about everything, but I hear you, I see you, I respect your opinion, and I feel like you do the same for me. And this is a great example of people who may not 100% agree with each other still being able to have a civil conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that, and I think one thing that is true also is that not everybody who identifies as like super liberal is 100% on board of just making sure nobody has Twitter ever again or something.
Right, yeah.
Like that, right?
Yeah.
That's like a good, because I don't think it's the right way to go. It's kind of like when you're a kid and you do something and you get punished for it. At some point, you have to, like, be able to show your parents, I'm not going to do that again.
Right.
And I understand why it's not okay. I understand why I shouldn't do that. And I don't. And, like, if you can't do that, like, Sarah Silverman's a comedian who, she did blackface before. She's made a lot of really horrible jokes. She's apologized. And she said, I learned from it. And I'm not going to do this again, and I understand why it was wrong. And It was wrong then, but I did it, and I understand why it's wrong, and I'm not going to do it. I'm sorry. And I don't, and it's like, everyone knows that. Yeah. Everyone accepts that that's the truth, and that's her truth, and she's demonstrating that. So should she be taken off of everything and not followed
I think
anymore?
Even if she didn't apologize, and this is where I'm going to get probably some flack from some people, but I think even if she didn't apologize, she shouldn't be canceled. I think that personal responsibility for the content you consume is on the consumer, not the producer. And this is the great thing about free market capitalism. You can produce a lot of horrible things in a free market capitalist system, but you will fail if everyone chooses not to consume them, if they won't buy it from you. If there's not a market for the awfulness that you're putting out there, then you have no incentive to continue producing it. It's not Sarah Silverman or people who make unpalatable jokes or bad jokes or racist jokes or whatever. It's not the producer's fault. They're supplying demand. The fault lies with consumers who consume that, who choose to consume that. They know that it's wrong. You know that it's wrong to laugh at jokes that are hateful, or that to consume media that's hateful or whatever. It's on the consumer. The responsibility is on the consumer. We all need to take personal responsibility. And look, if something causes you to feel a twinge of guilt in your conscience, then don't consume that content in the future. Don't blame the person who produced the content. You chose to consume it. There needs to be personal responsibility for consumers. And when there's no longer a market for hateful stuff, it won't be produced anymore because no one will have an incentive to produce it. And you can say, well, there will always be people who produce that and always people who want to consume it. Well, if that's the case, then you need to just separate yourself from that. If you can't, you just need to separate yourself from that and say, that's not part of who I am. That's not part of my values. For me, you can do what you want, but for me, I'm going to do the right thing. Good for you. And there's no reason to try to crush and silence and cancel and eliminate every kind of speech we disagree with. And I think that's what you're saying too, is like, I disagree with cancel culture generally, but that's the problem. And also socially forcing people or coercing them or pressuring them to change beyond just opting out, I think is too much. Like, for me, that's a bridge too far.
Cancel culture, right? If consumers don't consume something anymore, they cancel the person.
Well, it's one thing for Visa to say, we're not going to process your credit cards anymore. It's another thing for Amazon to say, we're not going to give you a platform to host your website. Like, we're going to commercially refuse to do business with you. That's one thing. It's a different thing for consumers to say, I don't want to buy that. I don't want to buy a ticket to this person's show because they've said things that I find offensive or immoral. Like, I love Dave Chappelle. I love guys like Seth MacFarlane. I like people who are equal opportunity offenders. They're not racist. They're just there to laugh at everything. They're kind of like the comedian from Watchmen. They see everybody and everything as kind of a joke. They laugh at themselves. They laugh at the clown world that we've come to live in, because it is. The world has almost become a parody of itself. It's ridiculous and absurd because we've let it become ridiculous and absurd. And the only way to get back to sanity is to let there be inappropriate jokes. It's almost like Michael Scott from The Office, saying there's no such thing as an appropriate joke. That's what makes it a joke. It's almost like we say these things because it's the absurdity of them that makes them funny. We don't really take it seriously. We don't really mean it. And that's why it's a joke, because if we meant it, it would be mean and awful. But if you make a joke out of it, then it allows you a safe place to engage with something that is an absurdity and to start a conversation around it. It's the humor of it that sort of takes the edge off, defuses an otherwise tense situation, and lets you say, yeah, we joke about that, but really it is kind of a problem, and maybe we should be more sensitive and address it, But if you can't sort of laugh alongside it, then it's just depressing, and really the only thing that happens is people just ignore it. You want to get people. What was it? Roy Rogers. He said, if you get people laughing, you can tell them anything. And I think that humor is a great conversation starter, but humor and comedy needs to be a safe space, especially, and there needs to be sort of a blanket ban on banning certain forms of jokes and parody and all of that, because there's just no good place to draw a clear line between what's okay and what's not okay. And so you just end up with cancel culture. I mean, that's where it is. It started with not saying, oh, that's not okay to joke about. I'd say, you know what, put on your thicker skin, you know. You can't say...
yeah, and if people don't like that someone says that to them, though,
just don't buy a ticket to the show.
That's what I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they don't like that, too bad. Like, I've seen comics, so I do comedy, and I'm new-ish, and some guys make rape jokes. They think rape's funny. Well, if no one laughs in the audience...
yeah, they'll stop making the jokes, because they'll just bomb.
Stop making the joke. Yeah, stop making the joke. Don't blame the people for not laughing.
Yeah.
No one thought you were funny.
Yeah. It's not the audience's fault. But you know what? If the audience laughs along, you can't blame the comic. He's there to make people laugh.
No, but it's like, if you don't get booked anymore because you're the rape joke guy,
yeah,
that's your problem. Be more clever. So I don't know. It's a hard thing, but I think, yeah. So I did want to talk to you a little bit about you do this program called Boots to Business.
Yeah, Boots to Business.
Right.
Well, to be fair, and I should probably at this point say I haven't done this in a year because of COVID. So they stopped. Mm-hmm. They put the program on pause in February of last year, and they said that they were going to go to virtual, like using Microsoft Teams, and then that never happened. It makes me really sad, because Boots to Business, I did it every single month for 7 years consistently, and then in the last couple of years I was doing it twice a month. And I feel very strongly that it's an important and necessary program, something that the SBA did in connection with the Department of Defense. It was basically a crash course in entrepreneurship for veterans as they were transitioning out of the military, and I taught the legal component of it. I think it's really important that they continue that program. But and I guess the program still is on life support somehow, some way. But at Fort Campbell, at least, it hasn't been happening for the last year, to the best of my knowledge.
So was it a nationwide program? But
yeah, it's in like 160 some odd military installations. I mean, on multiple occasions, I've talked to the guy who's in charge of the curriculum, the assistant director, and I have a good open dialogue with them that I value. I think their hearts are in the right place. They're trying to do the right thing. They don't want to create, just like all the reasons that people stop stuff and lock down stuff because of COVID. They're trying to protect people. But I think that there is a way to, even through COVID, even through the pandemic, deliver the program content.
Yeah.
But the government moves slowly. It adapts to change very slowly, and it's not the most efficient organization ever. And I think there's room for improvement there. And I've talked to them about that, and they've given me, the honor of being able to make suggestions to improve the curriculum. So I value my relationship with them. I'm still serving the program in my way, but I really look forward to the time when things get back to normal and I'm back in a classroom at Fort Campbell and, teaching retiring veterans about the legal aspects of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. I think that's a great way to give back to people, especially that's known to be a very hard transition. I interviewed someone a few weeks back that's a veteran, but she said it was different for her because she got out before Afghanistan, and what people are going through since, she got out before that, basically.
Did she say that she felt like almost a kind of survivor's guilt because she didn't serve a tour there when a lot of people she knew did? Or I've heard people say things like that. But it's just like they almost were on the fence about should I re-enlist? Should I go back in? Because I got out before all of this, and now I'm seeing people go, and the psychology of it. It's hard because you really are part of military life is a culture. It's a subculture.
Yeah, no, she didn't say so much that, but just that she couldn't speak to the transition because it was different for her. Than it was for people later. But she got a lot of her leadership. I don't know if you know that book, Leaders Eat Last. Wait,
I've not read it.
I think it's Leaders Eat Last, Simon Sinek, I think.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the title and the author, but I haven't read the book.
Yeah, and she just referred to that quite a bit. I haven't read it either, but it was just an interesting idea, and she was saying the military really taught her a lot about leadership, but I think that's great that you give back in that way. And then can you talk a little bit about the certificate you got for servant leadership?
Yeah, so my hometown, Clarksville, Tennessee, is a military town. It's right next to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where the 101st Airborne Division is stationed. And Fort Campbell's an important military base. I mean, they're all important, but it has some interesting historical features. And it's been a part of my hometown of Clarksville for a long time. So when I moved back to Middle Tennessee after law school, one of the ways that I got plugged in there was I got asked to speak at Fort Campbell and do the Boots to Business thing, the legal component of that. I actually got invited to speak there because I did a press release for ExecutiveLP when we opened and said new kind of legal service provider, basically business only preventive legal services. That's what we're about. We're not, kitchen sink. Yeah, we'll do your divorce and we'll defend you in the DUI and we'll help you close on a real estate deal. And, oh, yeah, by the way, we can help you start an LLC if you want to do that, which is what a lot of folks around here do. They do sort of like kitchen sink law, everything in the kitchen sink. So we were very niche, and there wasn't a lot of like niche legal practice, and certainly not business law for small businesses. My dad told me, yeah, your business model will never work. He had practiced law for like 20 years. He'd been president of the Tennessee Trial Lawyers Association a couple of years, and he told me, he's like, yeah, that's never going to work. A few years after ELP had been working, he was like, well, I've never been so happy to be wrong. He was like, so, you're doing good work. He's very proud of me. He's one of my biggest champions and supporters now. But in the early days, people didn't think it would work. But I had put out a press release about this new kind of business thing. And the guy who was in charge of the Boots to Business program at Fort Campbell at the time called me up and he said, would you be interested in giving this talk at Fort Campbell? So I said, sure, absolutely. And I started doing that pro bono every month for, again, 7 years. And after I'd put in, over 500 hours of pro bono service there, I just stopped counting after a while. I stopped counting after I'd taught several thousand veteran entrepreneurs through that program. But, if they had hired me at even half my hourly rate, it would have been tens of thousands of dollars to deliver all those services. And so one of the city councilmen put me up for this award when he became aware of the work that I did. It wasn't anything that I sought, but he put me up for this award, and I got the certificate from the mayor's office here in Clarksville, the hometown where the military base is, for servant leadership and, ongoing sacrifice and commitment to inclusion and diversity in the small business community. Because I've long been a champion, always been a champion of just treating everybody truly the same, regardless of what their, race, color, creed, sexual orientation, religion, anything, national origin. I don't care who you are. You're a person. Everybody's a person. Mm-hmm. You're not a woman person or a transgender person or a black person or a white person or whatever. You're just a person. Everybody's a person. It's just a human. And it's all of this ideology and identity stuff, to me, gets in the way of just caring about another human being. Like I grew up a big fan of Star Trek. So I kind of have like 24th century ethos, right? Like I always looked at Jean-Luc Picard, right, from Star Trek The Next Generation as like the ideal father figure. Just like love everyone, respect everyone, treat everyone the same, be good to people. I always wanted to be Data growing up, this kind of emotionless android in search of humanity. I thought that totally fits, like I want to live a life that's logic but values the best of what makes a human a human. And so growing up in a very nerdy way, looking at that as an ideal, like there just wasn't any room in my heart or mind for racism, and that's or any kind of ism at all, And so it's just with that being my ethos and this being the place where I was planted, in life, where I grew up and everything. I mean, all of those things led me to where I am. You could say it's luck, but again, luck is just preparation meeting opportunity, and this is the opportunity that I had, and I was well prepared for it, so I got invited to do that, and ultimately it led to someone putting me up for the award. And honestly, because it's not something that I ever sought out, I found it very humbling. It's just like, this is a nice acknowledgement for the work that I did. I didn't do it for the award. I've never done it for the money because I haven't been paid for it. Some of the people who attended Boots to Business, they did hire me. And so that was nice, but again, when they hired me, that was an opportunity to serve. It's just me doing what I do for the benefit of others. And I feel like people who earn a high income do so because they find ways to cost effectively solve problems for other people. You can produce goods and services that other people value highly, and so they're willing to pay you for them. And that's how you earn a good living, is you produce things others value highly. It's all about other
Yeah.
people and serving them and supplying demand.
Well, and it's great you got the certificate just for being you. I mean, that's
what it comes down to. It's like,
and that is humbling to
Yeah.
find. Like, it's rare that we are ever told that we're enough or even more than enough. I mean, that's kind of why there's so much. So there's a big industry just around self-help and stuff, because we're always trying to, so it's nice.
and it's
to
also
get
why
out like
awards
that.
are meaningful, I guess, in an abstract
Yeah.
way, because it's just like when we see an award, it's kind of like a beacon that says, "Hey, here's a decent bloke."
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Do you have any like advice or mantra that you kind of look to that you'd like to share?
I'll just paraphrase. I'll paraphrase one that I heard that I really, really like. Well, no, first of all, yeah, I'll say anyone, because you said that you wanted to be president someday, be a lawyer and be president or whatever. One of my favorite authors of all time was British humorist Douglas Adams. And he said that anyone capable of getting themselves elected president should ipso facto be disqualified from doing the job. Basically, anybody who wants to wield power over others should be thereby disqualified from having that power. Like, the only people that we really ought to allow to have power are the people who don't want it. That should be a credential. Like, the only thing that qualifies you to wield power is to not want to wield power. George Washington was that kind of leader, the first president, and I always say it was downhill from there. George Washington, when they asked him to be first president of the United States, he said, "Have I not yet given enough for my country?" He wanted to just retire and farm, at Mount Vernon. He just wanted to be a farmer. And he was like, "Fine, I'll do it." And that's what made him the indispensable man. So I would say, first and foremost, a mantra is only allow people in your life to wield power if they don't want to. If they see power as a burden, if they see authority as a burden, those are the only people who are really going to be servant leaders, and they're really the only people you should ever trust with any kind of power. Everybody else, be super skeptical. But as far as mantras go, I'll paraphrase. Everyone you know is fighting some kind of battle that you don't know anything about. So be kind, always. I value wisdom more than knowledge, and so I think that's the best wisdom that I could ever give to anybody is like, look, you don't know what that other person's deal is. You don't know why they're doing what they're doing. You don't know why they're saying what they're saying. They're hurting probably. Everybody's pain is equal and personal to them, The rich person who has existential angst, who really feels pain because they, through the circumstances of their life, have more than they could ever need, and they know that someone on the other side of the world is literally starving to death, that like 8 children every minute starve to death or die of malnutrition. Like, that should be a shocking to anyone statistic, and who would feel the pain of that more than someone who has far more than they could ever need? That's a very real pain. It doesn't mean that we should say, "Oh, poor baby," and soothe them for being rich, but we should find ways to alleviate their suffering and the suffering of the person who is starving to death, which is also a very real pain. One is on one side of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. One is the bottom strata of that pyramid, if you've ever seen it represented that way, where their pain comes from not having the means to subsist. And then on the other side of the pyramid, it's people who have all of those needs already met and they never have to worry about it, but they lack meaning and value and purpose in their life, the existential value. Both kinds of pain are very real and very relevant, and none is worse or better than the other. And what we need to realize is that suffering is a part of every single human life, and it can make us better or it can make us worse. And our job is to make ourselves better, let suffering make us individually better, and make the lives of others better wherever we have the opportunity to do so. But that's it.
No, that's great. Yeah, because I don't like sometimes when people say, well, they're rich, like they can't be upset. It doesn't make sense. Like, if someone's rich and their mom dies, their mom still died.
Their mom's still dead.
Like,
it's still
you can't
super
say, well,
painful.
you're rich, so you can. No. So I get it. All right. So the fun 5. So, what's the oldest T-shirt you have and still wear?
Oh man. Okay. This is really. I don't know if this is embarrassing or cool. So I only wear it as pajamas. Like, I don't wear it out, but I still wear it.
Yeah.
I have this T-shirt that has Woodstock from Peanuts on it.
Yeah.
It's got Woodstock, and he's got like an umbrella and a beach chair, and he's on the beach and he's looking around, and it says, "Where's the chicks?" Because he's a chick,
Yeah,
he's a
yeah.
bird, right? So
Yeah,
where's the chicks? And it's a shirt from Puerto Rico, and I think it's from my parents' honeymoon because when I was a teenager, I stole it from my dad. So I think they must have gone to Puerto Rico or something. It was anyway. Somehow my dad ended up with this shirt from Puerto Rico. This shirt is so soft, you guys. Like, it has been washed countless times, worn countless times, and it's virtually like translucent. So I took it from my dad when I was a teenager, and I still have it. And now my wife likes it because it's so soft. Yeah. So I still get to wear it occasionally, but I think she wears it more than I do as PJs these days. And it's just a super comfy shirt. But yeah, it's ancient.
So it's old. That's
70s.
great.
It's got to be like late 70s.
Yeah. I like when they're really old in this game. Personally,
Gap actually produces T-shirts that are now designed to feel that they're the like vintage tees, and they actually have that same soft feel. And I bought one, and it's like an old Star Wars T-shirt, right? It's made to look like the first Star Wars Episode 1, like it's got the Star Wars logo on there. And I bought it, and my wife stole it, so I bought another one. And so she takes my clothes. Even though they're too big for her, she's just like, it's a comfy tee. She like takes my stuff, and I'm like, fine. So I bought a second Star Wars shirt. So now I'm like, okay, is that yours or mine? She's like, what difference does it make? They're both mediums. Just wear whatever shirt you want, man.
But it's still, I know what you mean. It's like, but still. So a lot of people have said that like it's been like Groundhog's Day since the pandemic started, just kind of
every day's the same.
In their homes.
Meet the new day, same as the old day.
Yeah. So if it really was, what song would you have your alarm clock play every morning to wake you up?
So lately, I've had this, and when I say lately, I mean for the last like 3 or 4 months. I've had this song that has been just in my Apple Music, like it's like radio for you, the suggested whatever, and it'll come up, or because for like 2 weeks I played it. It was like on loop on my phone. Like intentionally I played it forever. And now it just keeps cropping up because of the algorithm, I guess. And I'm like, thanks for that. But it's Sean Wasabi's Snack.
Okay.
I'm going to be the snack that smiles back. Da, 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 da. Like it's a super cute, like poppy sort of Gen Z song. And it's Sean Wasabi is just kind of a brilliant artist. I love his stuff because it's like pop that you don't feel guilty about. Like it's not really guilty pleasure. It's actually good, but it is like music that's way too youthful for an almost 39-year-old guy to be listening to. Like it's like high school kids are probably listening to this. And he invented some kind of like MIDI controller. It's like a game controller that DJs can use to like make music. I totally sound like an old fogey. I should go put on my Mr. Rogers sweater right now, like change sweaters mid-conversation like Mr. Rogers, because I'm just that old. But no, I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, that like legit on a tiny black and white 8-inch, rabbit ears television. So I'm that old.
Yeah.
But so I've been listening to that, and I would have to say that would be my wake up track because it'll get you out of bed.
Yeah, it'll get you moving.
Yeah, it'll get you moving and keep you happy. I love Groundhog Day because it is a happy, it's like a sad clown Pagliacci kind of movie. Like it's almost like laugh to keep from going crazy because you do go a little bit nuts every day being the same. And that's a great question.
For sure. Cool. All right. Coffee or tea or neither?
I thought this was going to go in a more Pan Am direction. So I'm the old Pan Am.
Yeah. Whiskey.
No. Well,
how do you like your coffee?
No, the Pan Am thing was coffee, tea, or me. That was the joke. Yeah, coffee, tea, or me. It was just totally. Speaking of inappropriate.
Not when I'm recording.
Yeah, no. No, we were talking about the no longer appropriate jokes to make. That would be among them.
Well, I don't know if your wife will listen. I don't know what's going to happen.
She knows that I'm going to make inappropriate jokes. That's why she married me. She thinks I'm hilarious. So it's one of my only redeeming qualities. So, because I am a lawyer after all. And I like lawyer jokes too. They're wonderful. But to beverages, I'm going to go with tea. There's more diversity with tea, I think. And coffee aficionados, their heads just exploded like popcorn. No, there's dark roast and there's medium roast and there's lattes and all the other things. There is a lot of diversity with coffee, but I find more a broader flavor profile that appeals to me and that I can actually tell the difference with tea.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So I like tea, but I'm right now I'm drinking coffee.
Yeah. I bought a dark roast that's just too dark. I mean, I've actually cut down on my coffee consumption the last week and a half just because I don't like the coffee, but I've bought the bag and I want to use it. It's like I'm too cheap to just throw it away or something.
Can you get the Republic of Tea? The Republic of Tea is a brand, and they have a catalog, and I used to order from their print catalog before they went digital.
I'm in London. There's so much tea.
Yeah, there's so much tea. Yeah. But this is a catalog, I guess an American-based catalog company that's modeled after the sort of like imperial. So they had like the Minister of Tea would be like the guy that would produce the catalog. And so it has this very like intentionally British colonial era British feel to it. And I kind of love that. But all their teas are like, they have just so much. And so like they have a lot of really good green teas, and if I'm going to order a specialty tea, I'm almost always ordering from them. But then when it comes to coffee, I like Caribou Blend. Like I love their mahogany dark roast. Oh, so good.
Nice. All right. Can you think of a time that you laughed so hard you cried, or just something that makes you kind of just crack up when you think of it?
Yeah, so as soon as you said that, I don't know why. Well, I know exactly why, because I was watching The Big Bang Theory last night on HBO Max with my wife. We were watching through the old episodes, and there was the one where Sheldon went home for the holidays, and he told his mom that he and Amy had shacked up, right? And they were living in sin, and he was like, "Where's the hellfire? Where's the judgment?" You know, like, and it's just so relatable. Even though I never shacked up, but we actually didn't. My wife and I didn't move in together until we got married.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was a product of our mutual upbringing. But yeah, anyway, he said in the episode he talks about how he was feeling rebellious, so he went and got his ear pierced, and then it does like a cutaway, and he's like screaming ah. And then he came home and his mom took it and made him take it out. And so it cuts away to him screaming again, ah. And then Amy put alcohol on it and he screams again, ah. And so I turned to my wife and I said, I've always found that hilarious. I don't know why, but any instance where someone's just screaming, like in, I guess, either pain or surprise, I don't know why I think that's funny, but I guess just the overwhelming outpouring of emotion. Yeah. And I said, I think it goes back to when I watched Home Alone 2.
Oh, yeah.
And Marv gets electrocuted, and that scream that he does, always funny. 100% of the time, it's just great physical comedy, and I think that's really funny. Anything, people just being startled and they like freak out, I think is really funny, even though I hate it when people do it to me. My little sister, so like growing up, my dad would come home, you know, he'd have his jacket over one arm, briefcase in one hand, you know, the classic kind of Americana thing. And he would trudge through the kitchen on his way from into the house and come into the dining room. And then there was it wasn't a door. It was just like a big open doorway. My sister would hide on one side of it, and Dad would come through, and she'd hear him, and she'd be like, hee, 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 you know, and then she would jump out and scare the bejesus out of him. And I don't know if it really scared him as much as as much as it seemed to, you know, but he was convincing. It seemed to scare him every time, because she didn't do it every time. She would just do it from time to time and scare the crap out of him. And I would always be like on the other side of the doorway at the dinner table, just kind of looking over, watching everything unfold. And I always found that hilarious. So it must come from childhood. You must have to be primed for that kind of humor. But I thought Marv in Home Alone 2, my sister scaring my dad, even Sheldon screaming because he had to take out an ear piercing, hilarious every time in any context, no matter who it is.
No, that's good. Yeah, a lot of people end up saying falling, so it's a similar
My
thing.
wife loves people falling down. She has a video of her dad trying to ride a unicycle in a antiques shop or whatever that she'll just watch on loop, and it's just the funniest thing.
I'll send you a video for her.
Okay, great.
My favorite falling video. Okay, and the last one. Yeah. Who inspires you right now?
Elon Musk inspires me right now, and I saw an article on Medium that I just thought was really tacky, so I'm going to call out the person, but you know who you are, person on Medium, who wrote the 5 most overrated personalities right now or whatever, and he used Elon Musk's picture for the featured image, and I was like, don't be a heel. Don't be a better human than that. Like, if you don't like the person, fine. But there's nothing overrated about a real life Tony Stark who wants to like land people on Mars. There's nothing overrated about that. If that's overrated to you, you are a cynical MFer. Okay. Like, you need to dial down your cynicism a little bit. This dude is actually building a private space program. Okay. Get on board with the future. I want to ride on Elon Musk's rocket, and I don't mean that in an inappropriate way at all. I want to literally be on a SpaceX rocket, please. If people are like, would you be one of the first people to Mars? I'd be like, no, but I would definitely be on the third or fifth group of people to go to Mars. I don't want to be the first. I'm not an early adopter. I don't want to be on the first one, but
not with that.
Mission number 3, mission number 5. Yeah, sign me up. I definitely want to go. Would you do it? Yes. Would you do it first? Send the monkeys. Monkeys get the best out of everything that humanity does, right? Because they're the first ones in space. They're the first one to get like brain chips to control things. Like, they get to play with all the cool technology first. Of course, they do kind of get left up there sometimes, and that's a bit of a downer. It's like being a Russian dog, right? You just don't put me on that rocket.
Yeah, please.
But put me on the third one, the one that I think is probably likely to come back. That would be cool.
So if people want to look you up, I'll have show notes, but what would you like them to look up first to find you?
Yeah, I mean, just go to profitfromlegal.com. That's the new hotness. That's what I'm into right now. We're building out Profit From Legal to, work with our business clients to transform legal from a cost center to a profit engine in their business. We want to show you that using legal services will make your business more profitable, not less profitable. I know that that's counterintuitive. I know that it seems like an outlandish claim, but so is the claim that the world is round and that, the earth revolves around the sun. And anything new might seem preposterous at first, right? But give it a chance. We're working through proof of concept right now, and it's just a really exciting time to do what we're doing, because what we're doing is based on principles that we've had success with in our practice for years. Mm-hmm. So it's not like completely revolutionary. And also, larger businesses are doing this and have been doing this. I think the legal operations has grown something like 24% since 2019. Like 57% of legal departments had a legal operations division or whatever in their legal department. Now the adoption rate's over 80%. I mean, it's growing. It's on trend. It's really big. But for small businesses, they're getting left behind. And I just did an article about this. Like, if you don't have legal operations in your business, you're getting left behind. I just published an article on Medium, on LinkedIn Pulse, on our blog, and you can go and read that. And so I would say hit up profitfromlegal.com. Don't get left behind. Get some legal operations, get the most out of your legal department, learn how to profit from legal support. And I'm just a pretty easy to get a hold of dude. So Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, you can find me on any of those platforms. Just reach out, send me a message, an email. I'm not too big for my britches, as we say in Nashville. I will respond, and it will really be me, not some robot or virtual assistant. It'll be me. So reach out. Yeah. Tell me how much you hate me for not being woke. That's it. That's okay. I can take it.
Cool. All right. Well, let me know if you hear from anyone.
Nah, I'm cool. Sure I won't.
No. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Noel. It's nice to chat with you and get to know more about you and your career and how you're helping people.
Well, so thank you. I mean, I really appreciate you having me on and for giving me a chance to talk so freely about all of these things. And, I really enjoyed having you on the Profit from Legal podcast. I think that was some great content. So anything that I can do to provide value for your audience, I'm just happy to do it. And I really feel privileged to be here. So thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me this week. You can find out more about our guest in the show notes. The music you're probably moving to by now is by Joe Mafia. Find him on Spotify. That's Joe, Maffia. And Rob Medke is responsible for our visual design. You can find him online by searching for Rob, Metke. Thanks, Rob. Let us know who you'd like to hear from or about your own experiences defining yourself outside of work at More Than Work Pod on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Give us a follow. Or visit our website at rabiasaid.com. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to More Than Work. We'll be back next week with another guest. In the meantime, while being kind to others, don't forget to be kind to yourself.